You're listening to the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast, where when you can't be in the outdoors, we bring it to you. Welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast. My name is Walt, and today his name is Brett. We got a special co-host for this week's episode. Chase is, I think, getting ready for a lobster trip. He's going to go down there. He still has the oceans in mind. He hasn't quite made the shift to deer, but hopefully this episode kicks him in the rear and we we go full tilt into whitetails. But this is a special episode brought to you guys this week. What we're going to do is we've talked a lot about this Patreon hunt, and I've kind of outlined a lot of the details. If you're listening to this and you didn't get the email, or you missed the email, or for whatever reason we've got the wrong email on file, go to patreon.com/Chasing Tails Outdoors. And all of the new information, where the hunt's going to be, when the dates are going to be, where you need to go for the campsite, all that information is on a post in our Patreon group. We have a Patreon Marco Polo group, so if you're not already on Marco Polo, you can jump on there. If you're the $10 tier, you can jump in the Patreon group, and we will add you to the Marco Polo group as well. In fact, this group is actually available to all the tiers because all you have to do is be a Patreon member. But we also have a Patreon Marco Polo for the $10 tier, which is a little more exclusive. But all that said, that information's been put out there, and a frequent guest of the show, longtime patron of the show, has throughout the course of probably the last 6 months really helped me with our scouting. He's come on the show and broke down how he gets after some really big deer in an area that maybe isn't known for big deer, or maybe it is, they're just really difficult. He seems to have really found a pattern that works well for him. The guy lives and breathes it. Brett Mashburn, you've heard us talk about him before. He has volunteered to drive down from Alabama and scout this piece of property at least one time with me. And we got 8 trail cameras we're going to be putting out. But before we get to the scouting trip, he and I have been shooting a bunch of pins back and forth and coordinating on areas we want to go look at and areas we want to go see. And what we're going to do today is kind of highlight how Brett scouts, what he saw going into this piece of property, how he breaks down a new piece of property, because to my knowledge, he has never actually kind of paid attention to this property before. So he had a way he went about looking at this property, and then we're going to kind of talk about our expectations. And what we're going to do is next Sunday we're going to film the whole scouting trip, all the good bits and everything, and we're going to publish an exclusive video just to Patreon members where you can go and watch and see what we saw, see the difference between what it looked like on an aerial versus what it looked like in person. All that good jazz. We're going to put all this information out there for you so that when you come up in January to hunt with us, you've got as much knowledge as possible. And I know we have a lot of new hunters as well that are listeners of the show who are trying to figure out how to scout. And this one, guys, goes out to you. So, Brett, man, I appreciate you flying home from work, probably scarfing down some food and then jumping on the podcast for me.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. It's always a good time talking deer with a dude who's obsessed. In fact, I think it was like 11:30 one afternoon or morning. Good Lord. It was 11:30 one morning, and he's like, dude, I'm ate up with it. All I can do is think about deer. So
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So yeah, man. I mean, I'm thrilled that we're going to be able to go and scout this place. I think in the year 2021, e-scouting is maybe not, if not the very first step. It has to be just an absolutely vital way of going about scouting, even if only to keep us sane in the hot summer months or when we can't be in the woods, but especially if you're trying to break down a piece of property quickly. Before we get to this piece of property, I kind of wanted to circle back and talk to you a little bit about what does your scouting property, we've talked about on the podcast before, let's say you just get dumped in the state of Georgia and the guy says, hey, right down the road there's a WMA, you can't get to it for a week, you're going to look at it from above. What are your how do you approach that piece of property? How do you dissect it?
Well, I guess first of all, I would actually pull up, my property lines. I use actually Hunt Stand app. I like the imagery a lot better on it. But I basically would pull that up and kind of take a quick glance over everything and look for anything that really sticks out just right off the bat. And I'm mainly looking for diversity, and from the area I hunt, I like a lot of thick pines with some hard transition lines. So I just kind of glance over it, and then I will start actually going on the outside of the property line. I'll be zoomed in enough where I can see what kind of habitat is on private plus public, and I kind of just go around the property line, seeing what's on private, seeing what's on public. And when I see something that catches my eye, I'll zoom in and kind of do a little more detail. When I find something that I believe needs some interest, I actually will drop a pin there and I will label it pink. And for me, that just means an area of interest, something I need to scout. And I will basically do that around the whole property line. And if there's something that really sticks out that I really like, I'll actually put a red pin. And so I'm basically I'm using property lines and I'll be looking for just say maybe food sources or something on private and looking for something thick that's going to be on the public that's actually going to hold the deer where they can go to a designated food source or vice versa, or even sometimes I found pines that's on private and the food source would happen to be on public, and using that. And a lot of times when you find that, you can actually just in your vehicle can ride the road and just find big trails, and you'll be surprised the things you can find on them trails. And I know that sounds very simple, but sometimes that's all it takes is a simple way of looking at it, and you'd be surprised.
You said when you see something that crosses that strikes your eye, what kind of things in the past have kind of been those like eye-catching things whenever you're going around the property line with regard to private?
Um, I'm looking for really a hard transition. Like I said, I really like pines, cutovers, pines and cutover mix. Maybe a SMZ or a big drain that runs up, maybe into pines or into a cutover or hardwoods. Um, Stuff like that. That really catches my eye, and also water or something that can funnel the deer, and basically, well, like a back wall, as y'all probably heard that in other places before, but I really like the term because you have a transition line that could be hard to say from pines to cut over, pines to hardwoods, or something like that. But a back wall may be deep water that a deer's just not going to go across unless he swims. It's going to be a big obstacle or a straight cliff or a road. So that's what I'm calling a back wall. Or I look for a back wall that the deer can hold up in, maybe on an island next to a big waterway, and you can zoom in sometimes and you see trails going back to the mainland, things like that, and also funnels that maybe there's a high spot that runs out from the mainland towards the islands or high spots that's surrounded by water that would funnel the deer, or deer could get away from pressure.
I think that's important. I just got a message from one of our patrons right before we started the show. I think his Derek was his name, and he was like, he says, "Hey, I spent basically all day in this deep water, just pushing and pushing and pushing, looking for deer, and it felt like maybe I should look at some easier stuff, like start." What does a funnel look like? He had all these really basic questions, so I think that answer probably is going to speak to him a lot. And I kind of told him what you told me as well. I passed that information on along, which is something I don't hide from you guys. If the information I didn't earn it, I give credit to who's told me. And it was you that told me last year when I was targeting some new land up in Georgia. You were like, dude, start the perimeter, walk the perimeter, figure out where those deer crossings are, figure out what might attract them to it, and go from there. Those hard edges. That was another thing I spoke to with him was sometimes those every rule is meant to be broken, and you can say he won't cross he won't cross water, and the deeper the water is and the easier the other area is, the better that's going to be. I've found that deep water can definitely funnel them and be to your advantage for sure.
Yes,
Well,
I would agree with that.
so having started with the perimeter, just as a spoiler for you guys, we are not going to name any WMA names. We aren't going to give you any clues as to where this property is. But having looked at this from above, does anything stand out to you with regard to I've seen that in the past and it's done well for me, or this is just quintessential good deer habitat? Has there been anything like that that's really stood out to you?
Well, this property I've never looked at, never thought of, or anything. So just looking at it as a whole, there wasn't anything that really just stuck out right off the bat. A lot of it looks very different than what I hunt. And I was looking over it, looking for diversity, a bunch of different habitats where they may come together, and the diversity in this area is totally different than anything I'm used to looking at. So for me, it was a little harder looking at it. But what I ended up going back to is the time of the year that I'm going to hunt it, and being that I'm scouting it now, I'm trying to look at it as in further down the road when I'm going to be hunting. So for me, that was trying to look for more for a funnel, pinch points, things like that, not necessarily worrying about a food source because them can dry up or totally change by the time I'm going to be hunting there.
Okay. So you aren't really concerned at all with food sources.
No,
You're looking at true habitat features that would hold deer, regardless of are the areas you're looking for areas that would hold deer regardless of food sources available, or do you think they are late season options?
I feel like they would hold deer year round. Maybe not as much early season because there's no pressure and the deer could be just right on top of the food sources. And then food sources are going to change so much probably by the time I'm there that's another reason I'm just not worried about. But I believe these places could hold deer year round. I feel like it's going to be browse out there for them to be able to feed in and maybe thicker places and also there's plenty of water to hold the deer and in the places that I'm looking for, basically just water and land to funnel and pinch deer down.
Okay, I got you. Okay, so if you're looking at those kind of terrain features, what has traditionally stood out to you? Like when you're looking at this, did anything stand out as an area that provided you that hard transition?
So there was two different places that I ended up putting a red mark on, and one of them was a really big pinch point that actually butted up some really thick pines, and it was a spot of hardwoods, but had a um, it had a back wall to it where them hardwoods come down to a little small point, just a pinch point, and I put a red mark there because typically I found deer that would use that because the thicket would be in thick pines kind of makes a point. And I find just walking within 100 yards of them points, you find a lot of trails crossing. And seemed like on the other side that there was also a funnel that went out to possibly an island that would just be a good pinch point and funnel for the deer. And the other spot I found looked like it almost looked like ponds or something, just some type of water. And from the mainland, just say there's like three big waterways, and past that is like another like island, but it's big. It's got a lot of woods and stuff. And the only way for the deer to get between the two, the quickest and easiest, it seems like there is a high spot that runs right through all three of them ponds. Um, that the deer could use, and it just funneled deer through there. I mean, it would choke them down to like a 20 or 30 yard section.
I'm looking at what you're talking about. I see that for sure.
It runs right smack through the middle of them.
Yep. So those are the areas. Now, do you feel like you are in the past? We've talked about a lot about targeting does and the doe groups. Do you think that you're are you hunting terrain there? Or are you still hunting doe groups, or do you think you're doing more along the lines of this looks like what would be a high opportunity hunt for any deer, not necessarily like you're not hunting bedding per se.
Now I'm just looking for a high opportunity of having deer come by, something that's going to funnel and push deer through the area I want them to be in, within range. I'm not targeting doe groups because I have no history with it, so it'd be kind of hard for me to do that, especially just going in for 2 to 3 days to try to hunt them. I feel like to target doe groups, you have to know the area and like hunted it for a few years and actually get to know the area to be able to do something like that.
Do
So I'm
you
just looking for high opportunity spots.
right? Do you think the lack of really dense forests in this area? I mean, there's plenty of dense habitat to be had, but there's a lot of like really clean pines to be had in this area. Do you feel like that is going to do you feel like you could maybe find those doe groups within a couple days of hunting, given that there's only so many bedding areas, like true quote unquote thickets you can get into? Because that's kind of maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but it feels like that's kind of what you've targeted in the past, or like isolated thickets, right?
Yeah, it's possible, but to really, I mean, if I just say I hunted in it for a couple of days, I seen uh, some does doing kind of the same thing like every day. I still don't know when that doe's coming into heat. I still don't know if it's time for them to be bred. So I feel like it would take more time to understand what areas or, the does are going to come into heat to focus on. So I'm just really looking for funnels and pinch points and something that's going to push any deer by me. It could be does, bucks. Um, Targeting doe groups on a short trip is going to be super hard.
Gotcha.
You pretty much have to get lucky, honestly.
So in the South, one of the issues that we face is there's such a habitat range to be had for whitetails, in that there aren't like they could be kind of anywhere kind of situation. Why do you think was there anything to the funnels that you picked out that added to the idea that they would be there, i.e., uh, dense cover nearby, maybe a food source nearby? I mean, what it always feels like whenever you kill something, it's I found this rub and the pinch point. I found this sign and a deep water hole behind me that I could put my back to, which forced them to come through. What what all did you see aside from just like the physical pinch point, or was that it?
I'm looking for something that's hard to get into, something that your locals or for most people aren't going to try to do. Like if I have a spot that I know is great, if I had to swim or whatever I had to do, I'm gonna do. I'm gonna figure it out. It's that's just me though. I'm gonna figure out a way to get in there and to, to hunt them deer. But I'm looking for something that's gonna be hard to access. Something that may have some access that's really small and that's overlooked. That may say it goes for maybe a half a mile that opens up to a big chunk of public that most people probably aren't going to. Stuff like that that may be overlooked, but also, something that most people aren't going to be going to, or should be less pressure deer, especially on a weekend trip. I just feel like I have a lot better odds and a lower pressure, somewhere harder to get to that hadn't had much human pressure, and the deer should be doing more deer things in them areas.
I could see that. I could see that as well. I think this hunt is going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and some people are going to have to travel both Saturday and Sunday, so they're given a limited amount of time with a relatively large piece of property. I mean, this isn't an insignificant piece of property. The regs aren't like the most trophy of regs. but there's a possibility for really large deer here all the same. My one of my follow ups is: do you think that given the abundance of dense areas near water, do you feel like this is kind of an area where a sleeping giant could be? I mean, like what when you see this, does this get you thinking about Alabama?
Um, not really. Honestly, it's a lot different than what I've hunted, but there is one place that I've hunted that's similar to the areas that I feel like I'm going to try to be targeting.
I got you.
That's more swampy, watery, using them water edges to funnel deer,
Mm-hmm.
which I've had a lot of success. Place in Alabama, and, places that get high in water, and the deer just seem to funnel around them edges of the water and wood lines.
Right. You're talking about Bankhead, right?
Yeah,
Parker just literally spit his coffee across the room when he heard that. No, for sure, it's kind of a unique piece of property in the abundance of water. I kind of wonder if that's not going to lead people. One of the things that in the Patreon group people have been saying, maybe you can kind of add some thoughts. To this is I feel like some people might be overthinking this piece of property. Um, one of the things that was said at the group was I'm looking at some of these areas that are really hard to get to. I kind of get the feeling when I look at this that there are like it feels like there are places that stand out as like hard enough to get to, but not necessarily are brutal.
yeah.
Do you think that this is a piece of property where people are going to have to go 300-400 feet deep into a thicket, or do you think there are going to be kind of some of those areas, maybe undesirably looking areas, but they would still produce really well?
I think there's going to be some good areas you don't have to work super hard for,
Mm-hmm.
but or maybe just off the typical places that people like to hunt. It may just be getting the 300 more yards or so away from
Right.
some of them areas, and it looks like there could be some good areas to be funneled between water and cutovers and stuff.
Yeah, it has the feeling that I think deer are going to be seen. I mean, obviously, I'm not okay. That's really a bad prediction because genuinely, I'm convinced deer are going to be seen. I think a lot of deer are going to be seen just because there's a big group of us coming. In fact, that poor WMA man, there's going to be so many South Florida and Alabama tags running through that joint. The locals are going to be like, "What the heck?" They're going to be calling Woods and Water up, being like, "Dude, who posted an article about this WMA?" But it's a unique WMA because there really is an abundance of water, more so than I expected. Even when I got there, I'm interested. I said to you at one point, I said, "Hey, man," and I wasn't trying to take the easy way out. This is like a genuine question. I said, "Hey, man, it if you want to hit some of these water areas, I'll go ahead and order some hip waders." And you're like, "I got duck waders," and so I've got
Yeah.
some hip waders on the way. I think some of these areas we're going to come out bug bitten severely, but I'm excited for this, and which leads me to my next question for you. Unless you have something scouting related that you don't think we touched on.
Um, I think if somebody did have something like a kayak or a little boat or something, that they should bring it. They could possibly get them in areas that would uh, that would turn out really good. I've also thought about side note. I've also thought about even on a scouting trip bringing like a pool floaty and like put it in my backpack, and if I need to pump it up and scoot across some water or something like that, I could blow it up right there, sit in that thing and get across. And I'm bringing my hip waders. I kind of bring everything when I do a hunt. I'll have a climber, I'll have a lock on, a saddle, I'll have just my whole arsenal because I'm not necessarily sold that I have to have a saddle or a lock on or a climber. It's whatever's best for whatever situation I'm going to be in is what I'm going to use.
Yeah, I could see myself taking the saddle in and either sitting from the saddle at ground level or just sitting at ground level. I mean, there are some of
Yeah.
these areas that just the thickets and like the especially the water, the swampy areas. You know how you get to some of those and you can just see a country mile, and you just find a bush and put your back up to it, kind of situation. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, some of these areas, man. I mean, it looks really good. I think this is one of those. Okay, so this takes me to my next point in all this, and that my question is, what do you think prediction wise when we'll start here, when we get there? What do you think? Do you think you're going to be more excited or less excited having kind of broke this piece of property apart?
Oh, I'm definitely gonna be excited either way. Just I love being in the woods. Period. I don't. I mean, by myself or anything. I just love being out in the woods and just trying to figure the woods out and the deer. Just that alone is a joy for me, no matter where it's at.
So what you're saying is that was a stupid question.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna enjoy it no matter what.
Right. Do you think? Okay, let me ask you this: having seen what you've seen, do you think you're going to find sign or lay eyes on something that says to you, "There's a really really big deer here"? Like, do you think you're going to be walking through and be like, "Walt, I'm not going to come here till January, but danged if I wouldn't be here come opener of bow season."
Uh, it's possible. I wouldn't rule anything out, but you just never know. I'm sure I'm gonna find sign, and just like a place I hunt, I don't necessarily see sign of a big deer. A lot of times, I don't. It seems like a lot of the big deer just don't really lay down that sign, and so honestly, I just could be expecting a big deer at any point or any time I hunt.
Yeah, I could see that. I see areas. I see areas that if we're willing to work crazy enough hard, um, there's a serious there's a serious chance that you and I stumble upon something good. And I actually think there's a chance that between the 8 trail cameras we're putting out, which let me just say that's ridiculous. But we got eight. We're armed to the teeth with 8 trail cameras. I think with the habitat and the group of guys we've got coming, I've kind of got a feeling, a sneaky suspicion that unless the weather just screws us, I think that deer are gonna die. It's gonna be hard. I mean, we're looking at 10, 12 people having come. You're going to be coming with all the trail camera knowledge that I've got, all the firsthand experience that Brett's going to have while he's there. I mean, who knows? There's a chance that during the early slow period, Brett smacks his does, and we continue to scout this area out. I mean, my season doesn't start till the end of October in Zone D, so we might even get down there in September.
Yeah, scout.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, man. So, give me your bold predictions. Normally, I would do this to Chase, but I'm gonna do this to you. When you get there this upcoming Sunday, what are your bold predictions?
My bold predictions are going to be to get out and find probably 4 really good spots. That's going to be a fun little pinch point. That's going to look good for possibly the pre-rut or maybe the rut time frame.
Okay. Give me a really bold one.
A really bold
Really,
one?
I'm talking like you know how Chase does it, where he's like, "I'm gonna beat everybody by 150 inches in the African Bass Challenge." Give me, give
That
me, give
bold?
me a Chase Prince hot take.
A bold prediction that somebody in the group's gonna kill 100-inch deer.
I bet you it's Craig.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I bet you it's
It would
Craig
not.
or Ron. Yeah, I could see Ron coming over and dusting one like opening
He does.
morning.
He does have a lucky rabbit
Doesn't
with
he?
it with him.
I mean, I think he poor mouthed it. I think he poor mouthed himself all year last year because he was talking, he never really talked up the year, and I ain't seeing a whole lot out here. Put a trail camera, got a few does. It felt like all year last year he was right on top of deer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Alabama boys, man, they're just different.
And one other thing I just like to say back to the scouting thing that
Yeah.
I thought of is I would be willing to use a morning or afternoon or all day to do a couple observation sits. Maybe some of these areas you can see better, maybe see over some waterways, maybe a swampy area, or maybe just an area you can see good, a cutover, or just something that you can see a long ways in the area that you're thinking about hunting, and just doing an observation shit and figure out where the deer are coming and going from, and then being able to move in on them from there.
Mm,
Especially on a possibly 4 day hunt.
yeah, that's good.
I
That's
think
good thinking.
that would be a big um, that could pay off really big because I've done that several times in the past, and I think every time I've done it but once has actually paid off and for me to kill a deer.
Well, maybe I'll end up doing some of that going into the summer as well. This area is kind of hard to get to, and they don't exactly have access roads cut everywhere that you want to get to. So I could see sitting on the side of one of these cutovers with that new Sony I've got ordered,
Yeah,
and I could see getting some footage for folks and going to some of these cutovers that have those hard transitions that we're talking about, and just filming, spending the afternoon sitting in the truck or walk, ride a bike back in there, and the next thing you know, you got some velvet bucks running around there, and obviously they're not going to be right in that spot come the fall, but they don't go very. I'm a firm believer, especially in Florida, where there's good habitat. If you find good habitat, that's good habitat year round, and there ain't a whole lot of it, they don't go very far. I think their home range is pretty stinking small, even in Florida.
yeah, and even for anybody who plans on hunting like opening the bow season, that is one killer strategy to sit somewhere, especially on like a cut over or just any kind of food source where you can see a long ways and figure out what spot of that food source or the travel route going to that food source the deer prefer, and then come the next weekend you're able to go in there and ambush them. And I know your Ray talked about that also about sitting and watching deer
Mm-hmm.
and learning where they're coming and going from. I mean, that is a killer strategy, especially early if
Yeah,
you can get in there.
and I think it would pay off here because kind of going back to what we talked about, I don't think you have to go deep. I mean, here's the deal. I definitely think the deeper you go, the better the deer. And if you want to go after an age class of deer like you're talking about, you probably have to do something a little different. I have got 100-inch plus whitetails on camera in areas that are not hard to get off the road. Now, they weren't there come deer season, but they were there right up until the beginning of deer season. And I think if your expectations are more modest, let's say, anything legal is going to die, which I'm not judging anybody, even you, Brett. Uh, but if your idea of a good time is simply hammering whatever's legal and walks out, I think you could walk off just about any road around here and find yourself a 5, 6, 7 point that's going to walk out because we're going to be there during the front end of the rut. I mean, you're going to be rapidly approaching peak rut. They should be cruising. I think there's a lot of areas that people could have a lot of success pretty quickly. I'm expecting deer to be hanging in deer camp.
Yeah, don't look for me to let a 2.5 year old walk.
No.
I hear all y'all Florida guys talking about how hard it is just to see a decent deer. So my goal is really just to harvest a buck in the state of Florida, and then maybe from there try for that registry. But one
Yeah,
day,
I can see that. Yeah, for sure. I think it all matters on what we get on camera too. I don't know. I don't know
that's
how we're going to
possible.
handle it. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but it's it's going to be one of those things where I might have to figure out how to handle the trail camera data because I'm going to be posting these things and there's going to be 8 cameras and we're probably already looking at 10, 15 people coming. So we may have to draw straws or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I enjoy just putting people on deer. Period. I've always enjoyed that just as much as I enjoy killing deer myself.
Hmm.
I'm all about putting people on anything I find, and I will put a stand on my back and I will walk until I find me something I want to hunt. I'm
Hmm.
good with that.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of success just doing that. I killed a buck last year just doing that, finding hot sign and getting up in the area.
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this upcoming Sunday. Not just because, not just because we're going scouting and because I haven't been out of the house in a while. I am genuinely optimistic. I'm eager to learn from you. I'm eager to kind of poach from you the things that you've learned, because it's obviously working for you, and that's why I did the podcast. I tell people this all the time. Selfishly speaking, this podcast is about me learning, and I hope I hope other people learn along the way. I mean, that's just kind of why I'm doing it. So, yeah, man, this is going to be a good time. Why don't we, unless there were any bits that we left off, why don't we wrap this up here?
All right, sounds good to me.
All right, man. Well, guys, if you're looking forward to some late season action, and now this invite goes out to all the people who are in Midwest states and all those other places as well. Y'all's season's long gone over by January, whereas ours is just starting to fire up. And if it's something that interests you, mild weather, decent company, some pretty good hunting. We'd love to have you here in early January. We're going to continue to put out content. We're going to probably do a podcast follow up, probably about the same length, that talking about what we saw, what we broke down. We're going to continue to update you as time goes on. But we would love to have you down if you're a Patreon member listening to this. If you're a new hunter and you're interested in meeting some of the people like Brett, that I'm actually working on some other really good guests as well, who are really adept in scouting, to show up as well. If you want to learn from those people, if you want to pick their brains, maybe team up with someone and go hunting with them, go scouting with them in the woods and learn firsthand what they're looking for, this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for you to come out, hang out with us, eat some good food, have a good time doing it. We hope this episode has kind of got you excited about scouting, because it doesn't matter what time of year it is. Brett's a living testament. You should be scouting. We hope you're out there this weekend. All throughout the week, your mind is just thinking about deer hunting. But most importantly, no matter what happens, I hope you get outside and enjoy the great outdoors.